Hello folks, it is time for another daily dose of hobby nightmares. I hope you're having a very, very good day. If you want to send in some hobby nightmares, make sure you do so to the email address that is hobbynightmares@gmail.com. That is hobbynightmares@gmail.com. All you need to do is type in your hobby nightmare, send it there, and eventually it may get read out on the channel. I endeavour to read them all out, as long as, you know, that they're well written and that they go somewhere. So, let's jump in, shall we, with our first hobby nightmare of the day, and that is Matthew. And Matthew says, "Hello, Mr. North. Matthew here. I hope life has been treating you well. Yeah, it's pretty good, thank you. Today, I want to share with you my brother's, Midas's, experience with Warhammer 40k. More specifically, the moment he became an Imperial Knight player." Okay. "We started playing 40k around 5th edition. My army was Tyranids, and Midas's first army was Ultramarines. As we were kids at the time, the size of our armies was pretty small to say the least. Some of our first games revolved around us playing in teams with some of the other veteran players, and some of these players were very nice and taught us quite well. Others, however, were your general, you know, getting pleasure from beating the new kids type of players. I don't recall having too many negative experiences. Midas, however, had quite a few. Instead of sharing all of these stories, I'd like to simply say that our early experiences involved a lot of getting kicked down, standing up, and getting kicked back down again. As time went on, I started collecting Tau, which was probably the one army you wouldn't want your older brother to collect. A few years go by, the young Midas always feel like he's fighting an uphill battle, but one day at our local game store we saw it. A brand new model and a codex. An Imperial Knight. The store owner, Ron, who knew us for years by now, said, "Hey, yeah, they just released them. It's a whole army of giant robot knights." We were really excited, talking about which of us should collect them. In the end, Midas bought the codex and read through it, and he fell in love with their lore, especially the Free Blades. Every knight he bought was given their own name, story, and paint scheme. I cannot describe the look in Midas's eyes when he'd placed down a knight. Someone would see it from across the room and point to it and say, "What is that?" Midas would have this big smile and give a quick description of his Free Blade knights, even showing off the ones I helped him paint. I will include a couple of pictures of his knights, along with their names. Please do. Let's have a little look here, shall we? Dude, Free Blade knights are, like, from a lore perspective, probably some of the best things Games Workshop have ever done. Do you know what I mean? Dude. And you followed my advice and done it in 1280p too. Thank you so much. Now, these are great, man. These are great. I had it in my head that all of these dudes would have their own, you know, their own sort of background and colour scheme, and you did do that too. That's really, really cool. Absolutely. Don't take this the wrong way. You can tell a very young man's painted these. Like, the most 40k one is probably the Scorched Knight. Do you know what I mean? But I love them. I think they're great. I absolutely think they're great. But yeah, you can tell a young man's gone, "Way!" and just gone mental. But that's cool. I love it. I love it. Now these are more up my street. Wrath of Mu, that's cool. Poseidon's very cool. I like that colour scheme. Artemis is great. Really good theme with the Artemis as well. Goddess of the Hunt. Well done, well done. I want to keep them on. Really cool knights, man. I cannot describe... Oh, sorry, I'm going to move on from that. I've already read it. If you haven't already, take a sip of tea, as I'm about to talk about the nightmare of our story, alright? Today was a tournament with 24 people, if memory serves. It was hyped by our local community for a while now. I brought my Tau, and Midas brought his knights. The tournament itself, though exciting, isn't a horror story. At least not to my knowledge. Midas was winning all of his games, and finally, after all of these years, he might actually win an event. Once the tournament was over, the event organiser announced the winners. They had a podium that the top 3 would stand on. The third place was a Tyrannid player, second place was a Raven Guard player, and in first place was Midas. He was happy to be in first place, to say the least, and I was happy for him. Midas used the voucher he won to buy a box of Castellan robots, which he painted, and one of them solid gold, as his own personal trophy. This event was a big thing to him. Dude, that's the kind of thing that can cement somebody in the hobby forever. Brilliant stuff. A couple of weeks later, we played a game at our local game store, coming across some of the players from the tournament. After a bit of chatting, their opinions about the tournament started surfacing. They would say things like, "You only won because you're a knight player," and "Imperial knights are so overpowered." Even the Raven Guard player, who he looked up to, said, "I should have been in first, really." After hearing all of these comments, Midas started feeling guilty, feeling like his win wasn't real and that his win wasn't earned. No, mate. These are the kind of people where you just rub it in. You just go, "No, I think it's a skill issue, to be honest with you." You know, knights are killable, and knights have always been killable, right? They've always been very powerful, but they've always been beatable, right? You try again, Grey Knights, especially in the new editions, are a living nightmare for Imperial Knights, because they just zip around the entire field, you know, taking objectives, taking secondaries, sniping knights here and there by getting a charge off from deep strike right next to them. You know, they're just a nightmare to deal with. And again, this is a 9th now. I played Imperial Knights several times. The Grey Knights never lost once. Never lost once. You know, that there are hard counters to things in these games, and sometimes you don't get a very favourable matchup. But that's just how the setting is, and that's how it should be, you know? Anyway. A few days passed and we ran into Ron, who asked us how the tournament went, since it wasn't hosted at the store. Midas told him that he got first place, but he felt kinda guilty, telling Ron about the comments he'd heard. Ron looked at Midas, pointed to the back of the store and said, "Do you know how many times I've seen little Midas get his ass beat back there? Good job for winning, you deserve it, don't feel bad for winning." Midas smiled at the comment, but he still feels guilty sometimes whenever he uses his knights. Thank you for reading my brother's story, North. It was a tame one compared to most others, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. But we do have a bonus story. There was one battle little Midas played where he felt more victorious. He didn't win the battle, but that event that transpired was one that would be told many times. This battle took place at a small local team tournament, where Midas brought a pocket amount of Eldar and I brought my Tau. Before the event started, he was talking about the new psychic power, Death March, and how cool and powerful it was. All the veterans there told him how dumb of a power it actually was. Essentially, it made a Farseer amazing in combat in exchange for not being able to cast psychic powers for the rest of the game. One of the teams we fought was a demon duo. There was Dan, who was a really nice guy, but the other player was the type of player who enjoys beating the new kids. We'll call him Jensen. I'm certain he saw Midas as easy prey. Once Jensen's demons warped into real space, they fired into Midas' small Eldar force. His Farseer was the last survivor of the squad, now staring down a demon prince. And then it was our turn. Midas said his Farseer is going to cast Death March. The demon player laughed. "This kid doesn't know what he's doing," was probably what was going through his head. After we did our shooting phase, we moved to charging. I'm going to charge your demon prince with my Farseer," said Midas. Thus the Farseer now stood face to face with the mighty demon prince. Jensen just chuckled and picked up his dice. Actually my Farseer is now initiative 10, Midas said, so I attack first." Jensen was taken aback by this. Oh, okay. He put his dice down. "Well, you're still hitting me on 6s. Midas smiled. Actually my weapon skill is now 10 because of Death March." Picking up his dice, "So I'm now hitting you on 4s. The smile on Jensen's face was slowly fading away. Midas rolled to hit. "Alright, 4 of those are hits. I have Fleshbane, so I'm wounding you on 2s, and because of my Farseer's artifact, each one of these has instant death. Suffice to say, Jensen's demon prince was instantly slain by Midas' Farseer. Dude, that's a really cool rule. He was killed the next round by the rest of the demon army. Though the battle wasn't won, the combat was legendary. And for Midas, at least, Jensen was not very happy even after winning. Thank you for reading this bonus story, North. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Dude, that's what I fear is lost with the new editions, right? There are no more rules like that. There are no more rules really like that. Like something so niche that you just build your list around, and you can't wait to do it because it's like going Super Saiyan, like your Farseer is going mental. It's just a great rule, you know. I remember Grey Knights used to do this all the time. They'd stick force on their weapons, which they had to roll for, which was always kind of weird. You know, these Master Psychers are rolling to use their weapons, but you know, never mind. And if they hit anything with multiple wounds, it was instantly dead. Like if they wounded it. Now most of their weapons were, you know, strength user, so they would have a really hard time getting through a demon prince or something. But just one wound on that demon prince, it's dead, it's gone, and that was amazing. And you could really tell that it allowed the Grey Knight Codex to really punch above its weight against big monsters, and I loved it. Absolutely brilliant. But then again, if you faced an army with a lot of chaff, or another Space Marine force, you would really struggle as a Grey Knight player. But anyway, moving on. Actually, no, you wouldn't, because you had really good AP too, but you know what I mean. Adam says, so, hello North. I am a 17-year-old who is very new to Warhammer. Okay. Me and my dad have been building up a Night Lord's army over the last few months, and decided to have a go at using an airbrush. I just wanted to use an airbrush for zenithal highlights on my models to get a feel for it, before investing in an airbrush. We found Bristol Independent Gaming, which advertised airbrush and compressor hire. It was only for £10, and we would get 2 hours of spraying. It seemed too good to be true, and unfortunately, it was. Okay, this is why, by the way, this is the only story from somebody who's under 18 that I will read. It's essentially a product nightmare review, and it gets worse. We travelled an hour and a half to Bristol. When we arrived, we were greeted by a very friendly lady receptionist. She was very helpful, and I want to reiterate that. She took me to a co-worker, let's say Jim for anonymity, who was busy airbrushing some terrain, palm trees. Absorbed in his work, he barely looked to acknowledge our presence. There was also another older man with double specs. Let's say double spec for anonymity, who at first complimented my spiky army. Jim, on the other hand, was prompted several times by the lady to acknowledge us and plan out the airbrush session. After some more awkward pauses, we are talking minutes here, while he was absorbed in his palm tree painting, giving half-arsed responses to the conversation. The lady was attempting to find a customer service related solution to get me airbrushing that evening as some kind of compromise. Jim eventually explained in a hostile manner that that's very impossible. His standpoint was set in stone and was that no one was allowed to touch an airbrush until they had completed a 4-hour airbrush double black belt course in how to manage an airbrush, consisting of cleaning and assembly of said airbrush. Dude, you paid for your 2 hours to airbrush something? At this point I'd be saying, listen, I paid, you airbrush it. And this is the kind of attitude that really gets my back up about some airbrush owners out there. Like, they really are like this. It's like, look, I spray my models from above to give them a shadow effect. Look, done. Right. So, where's the talent? Oh, I have talent. I paid for this airbrush. No. No. You're not a very good painter because you own an airbrush. Sorry. That's just not how it works. You're not a very... You know, it doesn't make you a good painter. It makes you somebody who's lazy. And it makes you somebody who can afford to buy an airbrush. Right? And afford to... And when I say afford to buy an airbrush, I mean afford to buy a good one, to research it, set it up, get it working properly, and, you know, you are essentially what I would class as a more advanced level person who's coming into the hobby, right? But it doesn't make you a good painter. I've said this for years. Just owning an airbrush and using it doesn't make you a good painter. Doing it without an airbrush right? Finding the details, blending your colours, making sure your ink work's done properly, edge highlighting, that makes you a good painter. Spraying your models, calling them done, because you did a bit of a shadow from above, isn't a, you know what I'm saying? And a lot of airbrush people I know have this elitist attitude of, oh, I'm so good at this, I'm such a good hobby. No, you're not, dude. You're not. Sorry. I'm sorry. If you were, you wouldn't need the airbrush. You know, I'm just saying. If you were, you wouldn't need the airbrush. You know, and most airbrush things that I see, they look like, do you know when you get a toy from the, you know, a really nice toy, you know, that you get from like Japan or somewhere, do you know what I mean? They look like that to me. That doesn't look like something that somebody's worked on. Like actually, blood, sweat and tears have gone into that, and it looks really cool and really like, it looks brilliant, right? It just looks like a toy to me. Most of them. Now, there are some airbrush people who are very good painters, and they use their airbrush to accentuate their own skills. That's how you use an airbrush. You accentuate your own skills with the airbrush. You give it effects and details that you couldn't get with a normal brush. That's how you do it. Or, if you've got a massive army to paint, right, you use the airbrush to make vast parts of the army look really cool, and then you use your brushes to go over what you've already done and paint around it and paint it up so it looks really, really, really good. But did you notice there that the person didn't just use the airbrush and call it done, right? They used the airbrush and then accentuated what they've done with their own skills. A lot of the people I know with airbrushes tend to use the airbrush, spray it from different angles, pick out a few details and say, that's my army finished. I'm such a really good painter. No, you're not. You're really not. And I'm sick of these bloody YouTube channels who are like, oh yeah, here's my tutorial on how to paint a really cool space marine. Number 1, buy an airbrush. No. No. Alright? No. How do you know the person watching your video is going to get the same airbrush as you, with the same paints, and have the same experience? You can't. What you can do is teach them how to paint properly, with a brush. It just irks me, man. Anyway, Jim continued to explain, in broken sessions, whilst reabsorbed in his palm tree, that no spraying of models can be done, despite the ladies' Wilco attitude of trying to find a compromise due to incorrect advertisement on their website. Alright. Jim then had got himself into a weird auto reboot mode where he has to say the same thing a few times whilst indulging in his palm tree. It was as though he was mocking me with his constant lapses of conversation. Where he has to show off his amazing palm tree spraying technique as if to reinforce his superiority. It is clear looking back that he had some kind of superiority complex and could not stand any form of compromise despite numerous attempts by his co-worker. The lady then offered to do a shorter version of the course for a slight pay increase, which we were happy to do. Dude, you're more understanding than I am. Yet Jim was adamant of his rules, as he thought I would somehow make the airbrush explode or something, due to my inherent lack of airbrush cleaning proficiency. He wouldn't even bother to supervise a basic zenithal basing with a single colour for just a few minutes. Dude, this guy is a tool. This guy is a tool. And whilst, you know, again, I'm sure most airbrush people are not like this. But the amount of ones that I know who literally are like this, it is ridiculous. It's just, you know, oh, I'm so above you because I know how to do this one thing. Dude, I've got a finger, right? I can press the spray button. You know? I can do exactly what you're doing. I don't know why it's... You're not Bob Ross. You know, like, shut up. Enter Double Specs. He was equally invested in his hobbying as Jim, building some old world models, and he usefully chipped in to explain his car analogy, being that you can't learn to drive a car by driving the car. You must first know the components of the car and how to clean it. My dad and I were dying inside of laughter as he repeated his anecdote about the car 4 times. Like a goldfish. It honestly just felt like they wanted us to leave. The customer service was terrible. Apart from the lady, she did give us a refund too. She said that we could come back again on another time to complete the full Ultimate Super course, which I want to reiterate is 4 hours of airbrush cleaning and assembly. No thanks. Jim was paranoid that a 17-year-old without the 4-year course, 4-hour course on the intricacies of the art of cleaning the airbrush would cause his precious airbrushes to spontaneously explode. We left the store feeling sad and headed home for the 1.5-hour journey back. But at least we saw the humour in it and wrote this email to you as therapy, and I hope others will enjoy it. All the best, Adam, me, and Colin, my dad. Now, I'm going to say, anybody who is like big on nerd culture will know of at least a few businesses that are run this way, where you have one person who's actually really good at their job and a people person out front, and you have a load of nerds behind them with no people skills and a slightly autistic need to follow their own mental rules voraciously and are really rude behind them, right? I really feel sorry for you if you've been the person in front of these people. Because some businesses, yeah, you do have geniuses behind the scenes. Anybody who's into coding and computing, you will know what I'm talking about, right? All of the people who do the coding, all of the people who write programs, mental, and not good people, you know, to really having a night out for the most part. These aren't people who are very good socially, but you will always have the face, the person at the front who's like, "Hey guys, it's me, it's Dave, and I'm here to show you how we code things." Da, 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 right? And that's what they do, right? You have the Todd Howard in front, right? But there's a big dysfunctional group of developers behind him who are really neurotic, really nerdy, and don't know how to interact with other humans. And it seems like that's what's gone on here. And again, not all nerds are the same. I know many coders who are very good at talking to other humans, but I know many more who are not. And that's just, it is what it is. Nerd businesses on nerd businesses, and I'm sorry you had to go through one there, but there we are. Anyway, Mad says, oh, and Mad, by the way, sent me an email. Do not panic, Mad. I'm not going to read every single one of your stories out right now, because she sent me 18 pages of Hobby Nightmares. Yes. I'm not going to read them all out. I'm going to read the first one out here, and then I'll read another one next time, and another one next time, so Mad might become a bit of a fixture moving forwards, but we'll see how the first story goes, shall we, before we go anywhere else. Right. Mad says, "Hi there. I hope you don't mind. I'm writing to you under an alias, my online personality, to protect my own identity and the identity of the people mentioned below. Call me Madeline, or Mad for short. I saw your videos recently, and I'm glad to have found your channel again. Did you lose me? Listening to your readings made me reminisce about my own history in the hobby, which was nice. Though, the moment you talked about a certain Jensen and their escapades, a lot of memories came flooding back of my own experiences with certain that guy people. I had met a lot of kind and generous and helpful and warm people in our hobby, but let's face it, it's not always the kind of crowd you can write home about. In fact, some people are downright shameful in their attitude and conduct around other people, especially around young individuals such as myself at the time. I'm much older now, of course. Okay, cool. While writing this, I looked around my hobby room at my miniatures. And whilst most have some wonderful memories attached to them, some also serve as a reminder of less fortunate memories. Suffice to say, the more I wrote here, the more stuff kept flooding back. So feel free to pick whatever stories you'd like to share, as I've tried my best to lay them out for you. Some brief but notable context of myself as related to the stories. I started the hobby around 2001 in Belgium. Ever since, on a bus stop on a school trip, a friend of mine shoved an Orcs and Goblins 6th edition army book in my hands and asked me to please hold this for him, as he was needed someplace else on the bus. Naturally, being an impressionable teen at the time, I started thumbing through the pages, as the cover artwork alone was enough to make me go, What the actual hell is this? This looks absolutely amazing, I need to know more. The book, written by Gav Thorpe, was a breeze to read, and I was enthralled with this Warhammer setting. What truly got me hooked was reading the short story of Grimgor Ironhide, who is still, to this day, my favourite character in the entire setting. I got the 6th Ed starting box for Christmas as a combined gift from my parents and both sets of grandparents, and the rest was history. I'm in my early 30s now and still going strong in the hobby with a variety of armies. Despite having taken a number of years off due to college and work for a mega corporation for manufacturing, which admittedly kind of broke my soul and put me in a bit of a burnout to this day. Due to working for them, however, I was able to specialise in design, manufacturing and cutting edge tools such as VR and 3D printing. These only serve to ignite my love of the hobby again and facilitate my love for and entry to now owning my own design, manufacturing and consulting company for industrial solutions, which in turn, to help hone my skills, has allowed me to design 3D party bits and parts for the hobby, mainly for Black Templars. Alright, before I go any further, lady in her early 30s, successful in her career, and will give you free 3D printing bits for Black Templars and other armies. This isn't for me, but I'm sure a lot of my audience would like to know if you're single or not. Just saying. Just saying. Anyway, I'm glad to say that they also sell pretty well, and it has been quite the humbling experience to see some of my parts appear on Pro Painters models on Reddit, Discord, and Instagram. A few years ago, as part of a medical exam for my burnout treatment, I now know that I am both gifted and on the autism spectrum. I had never known this prior to my 32nd year, but it explains a lot. I've also worked with troubled teens and college students for most of my adult life, and I'm an active speaker and alumni at my old college to help people find their way in life. And my reason for sharing this is that upon reflection, it has given me a private insight and unique perspective on certain behaviours of other people in the hobby, which I would otherwise have difficulty justifying to share with any credibility. That said, I do hold the position that if you are on the spectrum, it helps to share that fact with people only to explain why this behaviour occurs and help them show understanding as to where certain bad behaviours may come from, but it certainly does not excuse those bad behaviours. It is up to yourself to make sure you prevent those behaviours and take responsibility for them when they do happen. Yeah, I agree. Completely 100% agree. And with this out of the way, story number 1 will start off with a bit of a banger, and I'll try and make these chronological and to make sense. Alright, nightmare number 1, Roy and Steve. As an 11-year-old, I was never allowed to go anywhere besides our local game store, as my parents weren't keen on allowing an 11-year-old to travel unsupervised to the Games Workshop shop in the big city with 2 plastic bags of minis and a carry case, nor did they want to go along with me all Saturday to said store. Which, being older now, is quite understandable and reasonable. Yeah, it is. They would drop me off at this hole-in-the-wall store, deeper than it was wide, but that wasn't exactly saying much. The tables were no bigger than 100cm by 100cm, about 39 inches each, and were only there, and there were only 2 to play on. And the walls, both of them, were loosely stocked with boxes for either Warhammer, books, blister packs, or some scenery pieces for people to play with. The owner, however, was the sweetest and most gentle person you could ever meet. Let's just call him Phil for now. Phil was tall and pear-shaped, had rosy cheeks, and was genuinely always good-humoured and smiling. Though he spent most of his working hours playing World of Warcraft behind the counter, he was inviting and would genuinely give you good advice on purchasing options, painting techniques, paint brushes, and would never ever push a product on you or otherwise make you feel like you had to buy something for his own benefit. He was just glad that people were in the store enjoying the hobby. Yeah, no wonder his business was doing well. Miracle that, isn't it? If you're a nice person who, you know, sells decent hobby equipment and models, your store will do well. Try not dry humping people out the store, that might work. He would even, out of pocket, organise massive gaming and painting tournaments at a local recreational hall, which in truth did little for his business, save for letting the community get together in a bigger space. That was kind of the man Phil was. Phil also had a mother, a head taller than I was at 11, but very kind, gentle, and would on occasion fill in for Phil if he had to be someplace else. The store would usually be filled with the same people every Saturday. Two regular faces were two teens of my own age bracket, along with, surprising to me, some friends I had from another school. For the two faces, we'll call one Roy and the other Steve. Roy and Steve were best buddies, so much so that they would always be seen together and would banter and riff off of each other as if they were in a rehearsed sitcom, despite everything being off the cuff. They had that kind of synergy going. They were such an iconic duo that Phil even made a small diorama of them as two Chaos Space Marines standing in front of his counter with a bag of chips in one hand and a brush in the other. Roy and Steve would be there so often that Phil would even put them to work setting up tables and cleaning everything up at the end of the day, and would treat them to chips, paints, or even ice cream from the store should they have racked up enough karma points for helping out in the store. While I still talk to Roy and Steve to this day, in hindsight, they were anything but a positive influence on my first hobby experience. Steve is a vegetarian and would be insufferable about it at times. He is also gifted and much more than I am, so he claims, and loved to lord his intellect over others. Snide comments or a subtle remark here and there, or quoting off a philosopher's words, or the distance between the moon and the earth, or some niche law that he knew from somewhere. He would compare paint jobs and ridicule you for your lack of talent. That sort of thing. Side note, Roy and Steve were both active painting tournament contenders at the time, and in the present day, both do amazing work as commissioned painters and tournament participants as a side gig. Steve just loved to make you feel less of a person around him, even towards adults. In his defence, he has since toned down that behaviour tremendously, but suffice to say, he did not have a lot of friends beyond Roy. Ironically, he always did assume that everybody liked him, regardless of his crappy attitude towards other people. Yeah, it's funny that, isn't it? Funny that. They all seem to think that they've got lots of friends when they don't. I'm going to be completely honest here. This is not... How do I put this? As a teacher and a dad, I come across a lot of kids, right, around my daughter, and if I need to go into a school to do, like, you know, some sort of marking or whatever, you know, I very rarely do these days, thank the Lord, but I can actually do other things. How do I put this? There are certain kids you come across where you just go, you know what? You're a dick. You know, there are certain people you come across that are that age, that are 11 to 15, 16, 17, where you just think, you weren't brought up very well, your parents didn't spank you enough, you're an idiot. You're not a very nice person. And I get told all the time, well, they're just kids. No, they're not. They're little human beings. Is what they are, right? And if your kid is acting like a moron and a irritant to other people at that young age, you've got work to do. Because if you just write it off as they're just a kid, they're going to get worse and worse and worse until they get a smack in the face later on in life. And that is what I think has happened to this Steve person. He has obviously said the wrong thing to the wrong people later on in life, maybe in his late teens, and has got either a smack in the mouth or a mental smack in the mouth, right? Verbal from somebody else who knows more than him, right? He's been humbled, and rightfully so, later on. Listen, guys, if you don't humble your kids, if you don't teach them proper manners, if you don't do things like that, they will not succeed in life. People will not want to be around them. people around their workspace will not want to be around them. I've had to have this conversation with my daughter several times. The world does not revolve around you. Alright? And if you treat people this way, they will walk away from you, and I will not have your back. Right? Like, we literally went bowling the other day, and she loves the colour purple, right? So she had this purple ball, and by the way, there's 2 bowling alley lanes, right? There's loads of bowling alley lanes, but we're on one where there's, you know, there's people either side of you, and you take balls from the same place. You've all been to a bowling alley before, you know how it works, right? But my daughter loves this one bowling ball. So I put it on our side, and whenever she goes to use that bowl, I give it to her, I walk her over, I help her with her throw, and she claps and loves it and comes back and is having a good time, right? Somebody from the other aisle takes that bowling ball and uses it, and my daughter loses her shit, right? She's just like, I don't want to be here anymore, I don't want to be next to them, they took my ball. And I said, well, it isn't your ball, is it? It's the bowling alley's ball. You use it because you like the colour, and you will use it again when it comes back. We will even wait for it. But other people are allowed to play here too. This isn't your bowling alley. And you know what? I was very proud of her. She sat back, sulked, and a minute later, she was back in the room and she was fine. Right? Because she was told, there is no negotiation here. There is no negotiation here. You are in the wrong. Your attitude stinks, and I'm not putting up with it. People like Steve were never told that when they were kids. Ever. They were never told that when they were kids. And that's why they have this kind of attitude. And that's why they're little dicks. And again, yeah, you can say, yeah, they're just kids. No, they're little humans. You need to treat them like little humans. They need to learn. Or they're going to end up like this and get a slap in the face from life or somebody much bigger than them when they get older. Roy was different though. Roy was a practical joker and had massive boy energy. In the sense that he would always seem to get away with the pranks he pulled or jokes he told that had gone wrong by smiling and trying to be adorable. Note the jokes gone wrong part, as over the years of spending time with Steve and trying to make him laugh, his humour led him down a less savoury type of pranks. In his defence though, also here, he has massively toned down this behaviour over the years. Again, he's probably gotten smack in the mouth, I'm not going to lie. To give you an example, bad jokes would range from teasing a player about his faction choice, such as calling Space Wolves furries, to downright trying to gaslight you into thinking you had already packed up models and books earlier or already taken them home, whilst having hidden the items in question around the store to make you believe it and or find them afterwards. Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you, they wouldn't last very long in my store. I don't have a lot of patience for things like this. Not with people's actual... There are boundaries, you know? You don't hide people's private property in a public space as a prank. Unless you know them very well. Right? If this is some kid doing this to my models, I'm taking their models and just throwing them out on the street. Like, okay, well, there's your models. Now tell me where mine are. You know what I mean? Like that kind of... Again, I wouldn't do that, but I would feel like it. Do you know what I mean? I would be really, really annoyed. I'd be like, no, okay, well... Yeah, tell me where my models are, or I'm calling the police. Or I'm gonna... You know... Have you out for stealing them. So, you know, it just really, really, really irks me. Don't touch people's models. Don't touch people's private property. Especially not the models. You know, for a little prank. I don't care if they're like... If they're in their teens. I don't care. They're little human beings. They haven't been taught properly. Somebody needs to teach them then. Sorry. It's not acceptable. People are going to think I'm such a weirdo for being like that. But it's true. It would really get under my skin. I'd be like, yeah, don't ever do that again. And if you do it again, I'm taking your models, I'm going to throw them in the street. Don't touch my property, please. I will joke around with you, I'll laugh around with you all day long, but there are lines here that you need to learn not to cross. That's it, right? There are lines you need to learn not to cross. And if their parents turn up, tell them to. Say, this behaviour was exhibited today, it's not acceptable, right? It is not acceptable. Sort it out. I don't know, man. I've got no patience for it. Alright. Or, as I would find out years later, Roy would gaslight you into believing he had rolled really well during a tabletop battle, or that his army had certain rules that gave him a massive benefit, just to watch you squirm against him or otherwise have a difficult time. Not for any victory, he couldn't care less, but all for the amusement of Steve. Dude, these sound like the two worst people, age or not, in the store, and they should be gotten rid of. On one occasion, Phil's mother was keeping watch over the store, as Phil had had to step out suddenly. This was on a big game day for him, and he had asked me, Steve and Roy to help with the clean-up if we could, after we had all finished our games. And so we did, along with Phil's mother. As I was trying to pack away scenery, some trees and rocks, into a shoebox, we all suddenly heard, Yo, Madeline, you're supposed to stuff that terrain piece into the box, not your jacket. Absolutely puzzled, I looked up at Roy, who had just accused me of stealing. And without skipping a beat, Steve joins in and adds something along the lines of, Yeah, Madeline, if you want a freaking tree, just buy one. How low can you be to steal from the store? Again, the worst. The worst. I looked at Phil's mum, who had just now moved in front of me, also baffled and looking at me. I realised what she must be thinking, and I became mortified. I couldn't even speak as I just tried to shake my head in disbelief, trying to make it clear that I hadn't done anything wrong, while she just looked at me with a disapproving stare, hands on her sides. I was told to take out the piece of terrain from my person, which I couldn't do, as I had not actually stolen anything, and she was telling me that her son worked so very hard for this store, and brewing up a long rant and scolding session. Meanwhile, I just wanted to curl up into a ball and die at that point. Ironically, I was saved by Roy and Steve, who at this point were nearly rolling on the floor laughing. I was saved by the fact that it caught Phil's mum's attention, and then it dawned on her that something more was going on, and she had had enough of our nonsense. She finished packing the terrain and kicked all three of us out of the store, whilst Roy and Steve were still laughing their asses off. Phil's mum never talked to me again, nor even made eye contact. It even took me weeks to dare set foot in the store again, and even though Phil understood it was one of Roy's stupid jokes and laughed it off, every time I think about that sweet old lady, thinking I'm some kind of criminal, it breaks my damned heart. End of Nightmare 1. Dude, these two? Age is no excuse, I'm sorry. No, I'm not having it. I am not having it. You can call me a old fuddy-duddy all you want. I'm not having it. These two would not be in my store for very long. Gone. Absolutely gone. You've not learned manners. You've not learned how to be around people. You'd get a stern talking to for doing stuff like this. And if you carried on, you'd be gone. And I'd be calling your parents saying, yeah, you're not welcome here anymore. Take your kids and sod off. You're not welcome here anymore. You can't parent properly, so they're not welcome here. Sorry. That's it. You know, because this could have... And by the way, Mad, they didn't get you out of that situation. They were caught laughing about it. I'm telling you now, they would have let you have the fourth. They would have just left that alone. If they weren't caught there, they would have let you take the fall for something you haven't done, because it would have been amusing to them. No, these are two ill-brought-up, horrible little brats who need to not be in a store around other people until they learn. That's just how it is. What do you guys think? Am I too harsh here? Are you just going to give me the, oh, they're just kids? Because as far as I'm concerned, if you're past, like, the age of 12, nah, man. Like, you've been taught better than that. I know enough mature 13-year-olds who I've taught in the past, right? These are people who can reason, who can function, and who know what right and wrong is. Alright? Yes, they may make stupid decisions from time to time. No problem with that. You know, they are morons at the end of the day. They're kids. But these are still people who can have a reason of what's good and totally evil thing to do. And this could have gotten you into serious trouble and kind of ruined your hobby for a bit. Nah, man. Not for me. They're not for me. What do you guys think? Have I gone overboard? Let me know in the comment section down below. I'll be back tomorrow with some more Hobby Nightmares. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you then. Have a good one. Bye now.